I'm Marcia Haaff. I'm the CEO of the Lutheran Foundation. I'm happy to be with you today. I want to talk a little bit about the opioid crisis. The Lutheran Foundation recently worked with Rachel Blakeman with Purdue Community Research Institute, and we put together a report. And the short version is, it's called FATOS, and FATOS means brave and vigilant. And that's what we're going to have to be as a community to fight this fight. So what did we find in our study? There are some bright spots. We have great interdisciplinary commitment from local providers and community interests. We have a breadth of treatment and recovery services. We have great problem-solving courts. We have reentry court, we have drug court, we have Hope Probation Court. We have the Syringe Services Program, which was highly controversial, but if we look at the individuals who are served through that program, it's making a difference. We also are finding that people are getting treatment as a result of that program. So they come and they find out, they get information that very night, and if they want to get help, they can get treatment the very next day. Naloxone. In Indiana, now we can get naloxone, Narcan, without a prescription. It's about $100, shelf life about 18 months, but everybody should have Narcan with them. So what do we need? We need prevention education, and we really need to work with our students and our parents. We need to work on a seamless transition between intervention and treatment services and recovery. How do we expand resources to include holistic treatment? Like Dr. McMahon was saying, you can't just look at one part. You need body, mind, and spirit, all of them. We need more treatment and recovery services for those people that are in the criminal justice system. And how do we reduce stigma? Well, this is a program developed by our state. It's Know the OFACs. And I want everybody in our community to know the OFACs. So how do opioids work? They bind to brain receptors, they change our brain, and they minimize the perception of pain. But there are these reward centers in our brain that get stimulated. And so they trigger feelings of pleasure, relaxation, and euphoria. I remember talking to a young man in Indianapolis, and he had been a firefighter. Had a fall, a very dramatic fall, back injuries, all of that kind of thing, and he was prescribed, rightfully so, opioids for his pain. Well, he's part of that 10% that gets this huge euphoria. The high was like nothing else. He told me it wasn't like sex, it wasn't like the best cake, it wasn't like anything else he had ever felt. So he is in recovery, but he knows that he cannot touch anything like an opioid. So if he goes into the hospital or a doctor's office, he wants them to ask about that. Does he have a tendency towards opioid addiction? We need to ask those questions. So the OFACs, it's a disease. It's a brain disease. It's not a moral failure. It's not a shortcoming. It's a brain disease. We want everybody to know that there's treatment and that recovery is possible. So Dr. McMahon talks about she might be Dr. Debbie Downer. Well, I'm going to be the ray of sunshine. There is hope. So we have to fight the stigma, and language is very, very important. So talk about it as a disease. It's not a drug habit. It's a person living in recovery, not an ex-addict. It's a person arrested for a drug violation, not a drug offender. They're substance dependent, they're not hooked. Medicated assisted treatment is a tool. It's not a crutch. And that's another controversial thing in our community about medicated assisted treatment. If I had cardiac disease, you wouldn't tell me not to take my medication to help with my heart condition. But if I have an addiction to opioids and I need some help to get through that, I need some kind of medication, and it has to go hand in hand with counseling, we shouldn't tell those people no. They are us. I could be addicted and you would never know. So we need to talk about what's going on from the shoulders up. Just because you can't see what's going on in my mind, or you don't know what's going on in my brain, don't dismiss it. Super important. We don't want to say they relapsed. We want to say they had a setback. We don't want to say that they stayed clean. They've maintained recovery, substance-free. We don't want to say clean and dirty. Oftentimes that's what we hear in the court system. Did you have a dirty drop? Did you have a clean drop? We want to say they had negative or positive drug screens. So I want everybody in this room to go to knowtheofacs.org. And I want you to take the pledge. I want you to take the pledge to reduce stigma. Because we have to talk about it in our community. We have to talk about it just like we would talk about anything else. We need to take away the shame. Dr. McMahon alluded to these facts. Here are the drug poisonings for April 2018. So it looks like we had a 50% decrease in non-fatal drug poisonings cases in April. That's a great thing. But we still also have 16 confirmed deaths as of 5/4/18, and we have 28 that are pending toxicology. And I heard a stat, and I just read about it over the weekend too. Those individuals that might be on Vivitrol, which is an injection which blocks the opioid receptors, some of those individuals are now finding that they can take meth. So they're not using the opioids, but now that high is so incredible for them that now they're using meth. So the opioid crisis in Allen County, this was just released by the IBRC and published in the Indiana Business Review, looking at the cost of opioids. So Rachel, I'm stealing your line, but Rachel would say, if she was standing up here, if we asked people in 2003, what would you want to spend $1.1 billion on in Allen County? We could bet that this is not what you would say. But that's where we are today. So as of December 31st, 2017, more than 1.1 billion with a B, more than 43.3 billion throughout the state. So we talk about the opioid crisis and we talk about where did they get these? Well, prescriptions. Let's just say I was given a prescription by my physician for the right reason. 27% of individuals got them that way. 26% got them from a friend or a relative. So I might go to my friend Shelby and say, hey, I know you have some opioids. Won't you just give me one or two? I need them to get by. She'll say, sure, she'll give them to me. Then they might buy them for friends or relatives. Maybe Shelby won't give it to me anymore, but she'll say, sure, I'll sell you some. And then when I can't find them from those ways, I'm gonna go to the street. And so I'll find them from a drug dealer. About 15% do that. Well, and I want to caution us too. When we were doing the FATO study, we were specifically looking at opioids. But everyone that you talk to says there are new drugs all the time, right? So we have heroin. People think that heroin is pure. Now we know it's laced with fentanyl. It certainly isn't pure. You don't know what you're buying when you buy a street drug. Cocaine's coming back. Cocaine's also being laced with fentanyl. Synthetic drugs, marijuana, please, please, please don't legalize marijuana in Indiana. All it's going to do is tell our youth that it's okay, and the stats are there. It reduces the IQ of our young people, and the marijuana today is not the marijuana of the 70s. It is very, very different with very high THC levels. So I will talk to anyone about not legalizing marijuana. It would be a disaster for our children. Spice, meth, spice, I didn't even know what spice was. It's kind of like this potpourri stuff, but they're mixing things like rat poison and all other kinds of things that we couldn't even imagine, and they're smoking these. And then the horrific things that happen to their brains, we're finding that sometimes their brains aren't ever recovering from these synthetic drugs. But again, there's hope. The Lutheran Foundation has invested in a resource, started out for our region for 10 counties. When we began looking at these issues with other community members, people didn't know where to go for resources. They didn't know how to find providers. They needed educational material. They wanted videos. So I forget which iteration we're on. Christine Johnson in our office leads this charge. But we have pages for schools. We're building pages for faith communities. We've expanded this throughout 92 counties in Indiana, but it's only as strong as those counties, because we want those counties to be able to upload their information so it's current for them. And throughout the state, we're talking to other funders who might be willing to invest in their counties to make this a strong resource for them. So, I want to tell you somebody's story, and I'm going to read it so that I don't get it wrong. Working and talking about addiction can become somewhat discouraging, so I like to share hope and good things when I can. This is Elizabeth's story. In my group meeting last night, we talked about unintended consequences of our addiction. There are a lot of them we go through, such as ruined relationships, financial problems, and etc. I brought up that I've also experienced the good unintended consequences from using. Sounds like an oxymoron, but let me explain. I took my girls to the pool the other day. My oldest is 12, my youngest is 5. Charlie, my youngest, is learning how to swim. And as she gets older, I can see a lot of myself in her. She has the same eyes that I do. Well, she was kicking her little arms and legs in an attempt to swim to me. I noticed her eyes sparkling from the reflection of the water. As she finally swims to my open arms, she was so proud of herself. And again, I see myself in her smile. It was such a lightning strike, aha moment, that this is it. This is what makes the fight for my life from sunrise to sunset every day worthwhile. And even with 2.5 years in recovery, it is still just as much as a fight as day one. One of the things that I remember at my rock bottom was looking at her face and trying to memorize every little feature, because I knew I wouldn't be alive to watch her grow up. To be able to not only be healthy enough to create these moments with my girls, but to appreciate the little things. Like a 5-year-old's joy is what keeps me going in the toughest times. There's hope. We do recover. We actually become better people once in recovery than before we used. We've been to the depths of hell and found our way out somehow. We appreciate every moment with our families so much more now because we know just how close we were to losing this battle for good. So I want you, when you think about those people who is every one of us in this room or could be, remember this little girl and what keeps her mom on that fight. So, as a Lutheran Foundation, we represent the faith community, a very important aspect of everyone's lives, I certainly hope. But this stat I talk about from time to time, with 100 people in your church on a Sunday morning, 26 of them will suffer from a diagnosable mental illness this year. And when I talk to pastors, they are shocked. They're like, oh no, Marcia, 26 people? And I say, just count, go down the row, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the stat's anywhere between 4 and 5. So this is my challenge. We're a city of churches. How can we challenge our faith community? Start the conversation. Silence the stigma. Those suffering from a mental illness are more likely to have substance use disorder, and we need to find the root causes so that we can help individuals live fruitful and productive and happy lives. Elizabeth was one of those members sitting in that pew. Together we can heal our community with hope. Thanks.